Good morning, and welcome to the First Baptist Church this morning. We welcome all of you here in the sanctuary and also all of you participating on Zoom. We know that none of you is here by accident. Whether it's your first time or your 2000th time, we know your presence here is something for us to take very seriously. By the way, I did the math on the 2000. It works for some of us. There are a few announcements this morning. A special thank you goes out to Anna Ennis for finding our worship assistants for the past 18 years. Yay, Anna. And if you would like to serve as a worship assistant, please let Linnell Pike know as she's taken over the torch. On Monday, the Uplift Support Group meets in the vestry at 3. On Tuesday, there's a special deacon meeting at 4:30 in the vestry. And on Wednesday, the Seeking God Together will meet at Salmons at 11. Thursday, there is a discussion on transcending trauma and the plight of refugees. It will be at the Dorset Library at 5, and there's an Afghan meal afterward. And choir practice is that evening at 7. During this month of May, our focus in missions is on America for Christ offering. If you haven't contributed to that yet and you would like to, you can write AFC on the memo line of your check or use one of the special envelopes for it. Happy birthday to Barb and Jim West. Anniversary is tomorrow. And happy birthday to Russ Taxter on Wednesday. And thank you to Martha Thompson for the beautiful flowers in loving memory of her mother, Edith Krakauskas. And I have two other announcements that are not in your bulletin. June is the month for our church to man the food cupboard, and Lindy Mila is looking for your help. So if you can spare a couple of hours on a Wednesday morning, a Thursday morning or afternoon, or a Friday morning, give Lindy a call. And lastly, for those of you who contribute so generously to the newsletter every month, if you would send your reports or other pieces to me by Friday the 27th, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Now let us center ourselves for worship as we hear a word of preparation. It's on hope. Hope is not pretending that troubles do not exist. It is trusting that they will not last forever. It is believing that hurts will be healed and difficulties overcome. It is having faith that within each of us lies a source of strength and renewal, which will lead us through the darkness into the sunshine.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want I want to see Won't you pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, 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 holy. I want to see you. Holy, 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 holy. I want to see you. I want to see you. I want to see you.
The call to worship is from Psalm 107, verses 1 through 9. Please join in reading the bold lines. Let everyone give all their praise and thanks to the Lord. Here's why. He's better than anyone could ever imagine. Yes, he's always loving and kind, and his faithful love never ends. So go ahead, let everyone know it. Tell the world how he broke through and delivered you from the power of darkness and has gathered us together from all over the world. He has set us free to be his very own. Some of us wandered in the wilderness like desert nomads with no true direction or dwelling place. Starving, thirsting, staggering, we became desperate and filled with despair. Then we cried out, "Lord, help us, rescue us," and he did. He led us out by the right way until we reached a suitable city to dwell in. So lift your hands and thank God for his marvelous kindness and for all his miracles of mercy for those he loves. How he satisfies the souls of thirsty ones and fills the hungry with goodness.
Our God and King, his love endures forever. For he is good, he is above all things, his love endures forever. Sing praise, sing praise. With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, his love endures forever. For the life that's been reborn, his love endures forever. Sing praise, sing praise, sing praise, sing praise. Forever God is faithful, forever God is strong, forever God is with us, forever, forever. From the rising to the setting sun, his love endures forever. By the grace of God we will carry on, his love endures forever. Sing praise, sing praise, sing praise, sing praise. Forever God is faithful, forever God is strong, forever God is with us, forever. And forever God is faithful, forever God is strong, forever God is with us, forever.
Would you join in the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
I have a maker before my heart, before even time began, my life was in his hand. He knows my name, he knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. I have a Father, he calls me his own. He'll never leave me, no matter where I go. He knows my name, he knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. He knows my name, he knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. He hears me when I call.
This morning, we're continuing our series on different Bible characters, and we're looking at Hagar. I hope you don't mind I borrow some of the leftover Advent bulletins to highlight hope, because we're looking at hope for Hagar. The setting for our story this morning is in Canaan around 1900 BC. Abram and Sarai are living in tents along with all the people in their household, which many of them were servants that the Pharaoh had given them when they left Egypt. And it's been 10 years since they first followed God's call and received the promise to have a land and a family and to be a blessing to all nations. And they are starting to wonder, what is taking God so long to start this great nation that's supposed to come from them? Well, God renews his promise one night with Abram, asking him to step outside and look up at the sky and try to count those stars. And that's how many descendants he will have one day. However, Sarai was not mentioned in this conversation. And I think she is starting to wonder if maybe it's not going to come through her that God's promise will be fulfilled. She's 75 now, and maybe her body is sort of signaling to her that it is no longer preparing to nurture a baby. So Sarai decides to resort to a very common practice at this time and give her personal maid to Abram as a second wife. Sarai expects that maybe this young woman will have a better chance of conceiving a child, and then when the child is born, the baby will be given to Sarai to have in her arms and kind of be her child. So the person that Sarai chooses for this kind of surrogate role is Hagar. And she never uses her name in the text. She likes to call her the Egyptian slave. Hagar's name, however, means flight or forsaken in Hebrew. We don't know what Hagar's circumstances were in Egypt before she came to live with Abram and Sarai. She might have come from a poor family, but the Muslim tradition is actually that Hagar is one of Pharaoh's daughters. In any case, she's been taken far from home, and she is living with people who own her and have control over her life. So if you were in her position, what do you think you would be hoping for at this time in your life? I gave it some thought, and I guessed that she might be hoping to have some significance, to be safe, and maybe even to be free. So let's listen to the beginning of Hagar's story and see if any of these hopes are realized.
From Genesis 16, verses 1 through 15. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan for 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." That is why the well was called Beher Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born.
So the first thing we were thinking that Hagar might have hope to have in her life was significance. And I wonder how Hagar felt about being chosen to be Abram's second wife. For one thing, he's a wealthy man at this point, but he's also 85 years old. Well, people aged more slowly at this time in history, and Abram had actually only lived half of his life. But still, the age difference is significant. Becoming his second wife, however, was one way to gain significance in the household. Hagar probably hoped that she would be equal in status to Sarai, and if she were, that would be an arrangement called polygyny. But Sarai was proposing a situation where she retained being the primary wife, and Hagar was a secondary wife in status, and that's called polykoiety. Verse 3 has formal language where Sarai took Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. So this indicates that there was a marriage here. But Hagar did not have a ketubah, a formal marriage contract like Sarai did. So by becoming Abram's second wife, Hagar does gain status, but she still finds herself in Sarai's control and shadow. However, Hagar gains more significance when she conceives a child. Being barren was devastating for women at this time, and now Hagar feels her honor surpassing that of Sarai. And Sarai senses this shift inside of Hagar. Hagar's gaining confidence, but Sarai is feeling more insecure. And she senses that Hagar despises her, and she didn't count on that happening. So Sarai goes to Abram and complains to him, holding him responsible for what she deems a wrong she is suffering. And Abram does not defend Hagar. Instead, he says, "Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best." Sarai is harsh, and she mistreats Hagar to put her back in her place and assert her own dominance. The words that are used in Hebrew here to explain how Sarai was treating Hagar are the very same words that we'll see in Exodus when the Egyptians are mistreating the Israelite slaves. But Hagar's sense of self has grown too large to be stuffed back into the box where Sarai wants to contain her. Her desire for significance was at least partially met, but she's actually willing to leave that bit she got behind in pursuit of another thing that's more important to her at this moment, and that's her own safety. So Hagar flees into the wilderness, living up to her name because she feels forsaken. Hagar's experience reminded me of another true story of a man named York. He was the only black man to go on Lewis and Clark's expedition. He did not have a choice about going on this trip to explore the land that was acquired in the Louisiana Purchase. When Lewis and Clark were forming their team that was called the Corps of Discovery, Clark just decided he's going to bring along York because he's 6 feet tall, he's really strong, he's 200 pounds, and he referred to him as his body servant. So for 2 years, York is on a team. He's allowed to handle guns, which black people weren't allowed to do that in that time period. He was allowed to be an ambassador for smooth relations with the Native Americans because they were fascinated by his skin tones. He was right along with them in scientific discoveries of new plants and animals. And when the group made decisions and they all got a vote, York got a vote too. But when the group returned home, and all the white people who were on this expedition received tons of recognition, they got land grants, and they got money, guess who was left out? York realized he was not in a position to receive all those things, so he asked Clark for just one thing. He wanted his freedom so that he could go live in the same place where his wife was living and be reunited. Clark refused. He tried to fit York back into the slave role that he had before the expedition. And Clark even wrote in a letter to his brother, "York of very little service to me, insolent and sulky. I gave him a severe trouncing the other day, and he is much mended." How does that make you feel? The injustice, the blindness to the truth that everyone has dignity and integrity and worth without regard to their ancestry or appearance or status. It's really heartbreaking. You also may know what it feels like to have your hope for significance crushed. It's even harder when you've gotten a taste for respect that you really wanted, and then somehow people take it back away. But no matter what other people say or how they treat us, nobody can take away our significance because it's a God-given gift. because we're created in his image. No one has the right to make us small enough to fit into their box. God says so. He cares about us. He cares about our hopes. And God showed this to Hagar on the day that she ran away. In Genesis 16:7, we have an angel of the Lord finding Hagar near a spring in the desert. Anyone could have found her there. A young, pregnant woman alone in the wilderness with no supplies. She was very vulnerable and could have been done harm. God's concerned for her and comes to her. And for the first time, she hears her name spoken, Hagar. And then 2 questions. Where have you come from? And where are you going? She answers the first one. She says she's running away from her mistress Sarai, but she doesn't have an answer for the second question. She doesn't really have a plan. She's just running away, trying to get away from Sarai's harsh treatment. Maybe she wanted to go back to Egypt, but it's a long trip, and she just wasn't going to make it on her own. I imagine that Hagar is disappointed, maybe even angry when she hears the angel's plan, go back to your mistress and submit to her. But that is where God knows she will be safe, and he will give her significance. It won't be without difficulty, but God gives her something amazing, a covenant of her very own, similar to the one he had given to Abram. I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. And she receives a birth announcement, an annunciation like Mary did before she gave birth to Jesus. You will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. That's what Ishmael means. Every time she would call his name, she would be saying, God will hear. Hagar even gets a little glimpse of her son's future. The angel says, he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Sounds like a strong-willed child to me. I'm not sure how Hagar felt about this part of the oracle, but maybe she heard, my son's going to be scrappy. He's going to be a survivor. He's not going to let anybody control him. Maybe that's okay with her, because she had a desire for that herself. She wanted to be free too. God saw all of this. He saw her, and he was going to make a way for her to have a hope and a future. And I don't know if you know this, but verse 13 is one of the most remarkable verses in the entire Bible, because Hagar is the first and the only person in all the Hebrew scriptures to give God a name that he doesn't reveal from himself. She names God, El Roi, the God who sees me. It didn't matter that she was a woman in a patriarchal society. It didn't matter that she was a slave. She has seen the one who sees her, and she is acting every bit in the dignity of the image of God by giving him a name. And she doesn't stop there. She actually names a well nearby, Beher Lahai Roi, which means the well of him that lives and sees me. And this well stands for thousands of years after Hagar is gone and gives testament to her story and to the God who sees the people who come to that well. I've just finished reading a book entitled Somewhere Safe with Somebody Good. It's a fictional story, part of a Mitford series, and the whole thing contains beautiful stories about encounters with God and how he restores people. That phrase that serves as the title of the book originally comes from a character named Cynthia, who is a talented artist and a children's book writer. Her childhood was very lonely. Her parents were very distant. I don't think she had any siblings. And she kind of felt like Hagar, because when she got married, her husband had a wandering eye and was not faithful to her. He left her because she couldn't have any children. She was in such despair that she actually tried to take her own life. But when that attempt failed, she cried out to God with a desire to be somewhere safe with somebody good. And God brought her into a loving marriage with her next-door neighbor, Tim Cavanaugh, who is the priest in the town, and he's kind of an older bachelor guy, and they have a romance and get married. And through Tim and Cynthia, God helped to find that missing and mistreated Barlow children. I think there were 5 of them, grown into a family where the mom and dad were both very alcoholic and not thinking, concretely or taking care of their children. The mom at one point traded one of her children for a gallon of whiskey, and they didn't know where he went. But they find all of these children, and some of them are pretty angry and hurt. And they are so patient as they take time for the trust to grow and to see them and to let them know that God sees them so that they can heal where they have had trauma and prepare them for a future where their gifts can shine. It takes time for all of us and patience for trust to grow. It's true in any situation, especially when there's been trauma. And God's instruction to Hagar to return might seem heavy, but he's giving her a chance to be in a place that will be relatively safe, where she can grow in faith, and she and her son Ishmael will learn important things and go through experiences that will make them ready for when he's going to provide a new kind of freedom for them. How about you? Have you been through the process of growing in faith and trust with the God who sees you? It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not easy, but you can do that. When God is the center of your life, you are somewhere safe with somebody good. So how about freedom? Hagar returns to Abram and Sarah and gives birth to her son, just like God said she would, and Abram takes the name that she told him, God said, and names him Ishmael. That tells me that Hagar has shared her story back at the camp of encountering God in the desert, and that she was heard and she was believed and she was taken seriously. In the following chapters, God changes some names. Abram becomes Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah, specifically to include her in the promise of becoming father and mother to a great nation. And Abraham laughs in his heart, not out loud. Have you ever tried that, to laugh and have no one know that you're laughing? But you can't fool God, he knows. And he's like, God, can you just see my son Ishmael and bless him? He's already here, and I love him. He thinks it's too late for Sarah to become a mother. And so Genesis 16:20, God says, as for Ishmael, I have heard you, and I surely will bless him. I will make him fruitful and greatly increase his numbers. He will be a father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. And you remember that Isaac's name means laughter. It wasn't just Sarah who laughed, Abraham too. So on the day of this conversation, Abraham obeys God's instruction that he had given in concert with this promise and institutes circumcision. So Ishmael's 13, and he gets circumcised. And so does Abraham. And all the males born in that whole household, they're marked with the covenant of God. And I'm going to say this is a memorable experience for Ishmael. In fact, in the Muslim culture, they still circumcise boys at 13. Hagar is surely aware of God's promise, and I think she might be getting a little nervous to see what will happen next. Will Sarah really have a son to displace Ishmael from becoming the heir? What happens right next is actually kind of surprising. Abimelech, king of Gerar, where they had just moved, decides that he wants Sarah to be part of his harem. And I'm thinking, wow, what does this woman have that in her late 80s she is so desirable and beautiful that the king wants her to be part of the harem? But he does. And Abraham doesn't object. They use the standard line, well, okay, she's my sister, you can have her. So for a month or two, Hagar is actually out of the household. I'm sorry, did I say Hagar? I meant Sarah. And Hagar gets to have the place to herself. It's just Abraham and her, and she's in the matriarch role, and we've got Ishmael here, and she finally gets like, wow, Sarah's gone. This moment to breathe. But God intervenes again. Oh man. He sends a dream to warn Abimelech not to touch Sarah. And Abimelech responds by returning Sarah right away to Abraham. And there's been like a curse afflicting the household, and it needs to get lifted. And Abraham needs to pray for all their fertility to be restored in Abimelech's house. And so he does. He prays for them. Abimelech gives them lots more servants and gifts and all kinds of things, and Sarah becomes fertile. At this time, when Abraham is praying for the whole other household, Sarah becomes fertile. So now she's pregnant, and with her stigma of infertility lifted and God's blessing evident in her life, she's finally happy. She has a baby in arms, and it's her own. And she's nursing him and holding him and can't believe it, and she's laughing for joy. And when he's weaned, which is probably around age 3, they have a great feast to celebrate. Ishmael is a teenager, remember? And now he has a little brother who is a toddler. And Sarah sees Ishmael playing with Isaac in a way that she didn't like. Maybe he's making fun of him. I don't know what was going on. But can you just see Sarah's furrow lines reappear on her face? She's like, I don't think I like this. She doesn't want Isaac to have a rival for his father's affection or for the inheritance. So she says to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. This time, Abraham is torn because he is very attached to Ishmael. He loves him, and he does not want to lose him. The text doesn't even tell us how he feels about Hagar. But instead of just giving in to Sarah, he actually takes the dilemma to God, which is a good thing for us to do at any time. And God gives him the instruction to let Hagar and Ishmael go. So early the next morning, Abraham takes some food and a skin of water and gives them to Hagar and sends her off with the boy. So Hagar is back in the wilderness, this time not by her own choice, but once again feeling very forsaken. She and Ishmael, they don't know where they are. They had recently moved there. They don't know the wilderness. They're in the desert of Beersheba, and they're wandering around, and their water runs out. And Hagar decides to put Ishmael under an acacia tree so he can have a little bit of shade. And then she goes a bow shot away because she doesn't want to hear him crying, and she doesn't want to see him die. And that's what she thinks is going to happen. She and Ishmael are both crying. And guess what? God hears them. God sends an angel to ask her, what is the matter, Hagar? Well, isn't it obvious? I've lost my hope. I have no future here. I'm dying in the desert. But God's going to help her see a way forward. The angel says, don't be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift up the boy, take him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation. And then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and they both had plenty of water to drink. And the wilderness became their home. Ishmael grew up to be a great archer, and it says that God was with him. And the last thing we read about Hagar is that she goes back to Egypt to find a proper wife for her son Ishmael. And she's the only woman in the whole scripture that makes a trip like that all on her own. And I think that kind of tells me that she's kind of a strong, independent woman. What do you think? She and Ishmael are free, and God is with them. And if you look ahead to the genealogies, God fulfills his promise to Hagar and Ishmael, and he has 12 sons, 12 tribes, just parallel to Israel. And, you know, the Israelites don't really fight the Ishmaelites. Have you ever heard the Ishmaelites in the Old Testament? The only thing I see them doing together is Isaac and Ishmael get together and bury Abraham many years later in the cave of their ancestors. Others may have abandoned them, but God did not, and God will not abandon you either. You matter to him, and he will make a way for you to have your desire for significance and safety and freedom fulfilled. He did for a lady named Bunmi. She's a lady from Nigeria who came to the United States because a friend in her country had a sister in America, and there was an invitation for Bunmi to come over and help watch the lady's daughter for 3 months while she was studying for a really big exam. And she thought, my kids are grown, they're in Canada, and I'm gonna have this adventure, and maybe I'll make enough money to come back to Nigeria and have a business of my own that I can start. So she took a leave of absence from her job, and she went to America. And it wasn't like she thought it was gonna be. It got kind of rough, and the people weren't treating her very well. She wanted to go back to Nigeria, and it got worse. The torturing started, and she became a real slave. They wouldn't give her her passport. I think they destroyed it, and they didn't have her ticket anymore. She worked from 4 a.m. till late at night, and she was not allowed to leave the house ever. Her daughter in Canada tried to offer money in exchange for her mom's freedom, but it was refused, and the family started making death threats. So Bunmi wondered, is this the place where I'm gonna die? She says, thank God the FBI heard about it, and they came down and picked me up from the house. So she was suddenly free, but she had no idea what to do next. She knew that her job in Nigeria was gone, and she didn't have any way to get back there without any documents or money. She describes the day when she came to a place called The Well. And Matt and I know about this place because it's near where we used to live in Pennsylvania. It's a home on 80 acres where women who have been trafficked can heal, have therapy, grow in faith, and form a plan for the future and learn whatever skills they need to make that new life. After being trapped in a house for so long, she said she'll never forget the experience of riding up this really long driveway lined with trees thinking, what is this place? She said, I cried and prayed, Lord, let your will be done. And that's how I found my safety in The Well. The Well taught me how to use my voice. She learned how to use computer, she took English classes, and she started working at this store that The Well has called Worthwhile Wear. And she was able to help customers and save money until she could afford to get her very own car and apartment. And The Well even helped her daughter from Canada come for a visit. She's very free and happy now because she's found her hopes realized, just like Hagar did. Step by step, God showed them that he sees them, he cares, and he has a good future for them. Sometimes our life circumstances lead us to feel like nobody sees us, that we're not important, that our hopes and dreams are impossible. But the message in Hagar's story is that no matter how other people assess your worth, God loves you. and wants you in his family. He gives you significance that nobody can take away from you. And no matter what you've been through or how people might have mistreated you, God invites you to come close and to trust him so that you can heal and you can find your voice. No matter what happens to displace you from the place you thought you belonged, God is opening a door of freedom for you, and he will provide the well that you need, not just to survive, but also to thrive. God sees you. Are the eyes of your heart opened to see him? I want you to sit with that question while we just hear a song called Hagar's Song.
I am a flyer. You find me by water, lonely and tired, lost and afraid. I am a stranger, the means of a master, soon to be mother in desolate plains. You're the one who sees me. You see me, hear me in my misery. You're the one who sees. You're the one who saves me. You save me, even when I'm wandering. You're the one who saves. We become wanderers, the loss of a father. Sun's getting hotter, the waters run dry, broken, unstable, done all that I'm able. Tears draw a trail and shout to the sky. You're the one who sees me. You see me, hear me in my misery. You're the one who sees. You're the one who saves me. You save me, even in my wandering. You're the one who saves. You're the one who sees me. You see me, hear me in my misery. You're the one who sees. You're the one who saves me. You save me, even in my wandering. You're the one who saves.
is your faithfulness, O God. You wrestle with the sinner's heart. You lead us by still waters and to mercy, and nothing can keep us apart. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, O God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Great is your love and justice, God. You use the weak to lead the strong. You lead us in the song of your salvation, and all your people sing along. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, O God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. So remember your people, remember your children, remember your promise, O God. Your grace is enough, your grace is enough, your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough, heaven's reaching down to us. Your grace is enough for me. God, I see your grace is enough. I'm covered in your love. Your grace is enough for me.
Please receive your benediction from Psalm 9, 9, and 10 from the Passion Translation. May all who are oppressed come to the Lord who sees, for he is a shelter in the time of trouble, a perfect hiding place. May we know your wonderful name and keep putting our trust in you. May we count on you for help no matter what, because you will never neglect those who come to you. Amen.